There's an enzyme that costs $1 per day. It has been studied in peer-reviewed cardiology journals for over 30 years. It supports the body's natural ability to break down fibrin. Fibrin is the protein that forms the structural mesh inside blood clots. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. It kills one person every 33 seconds. And most of that risk builds silently over decades before any symptom appears. The enzyme is called Nattokinase. It comes from a fermented Japanese food called natto that has been eaten for over 1,000 years. It costs approximately $30 for a month's supply. The leading prescription anticoagulants cost between $200 and $400 per month. Nattokinase cannot replace anticoagulant medication for people who need it. But for healthy adults looking to support cardiovascular health before a problem develops, the research is more substantial than almost anyone in a standard appointment will tell you. This is not a treatment. This is the science of prevention. And the gap between what the research shows and what reaches patients is significant. Welcome to Forbidden Camping. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and ring the bell. This is where we open what the health industry keeps quietly filed away. Now let's go inside this one. Natto has been a staple food in Japan since at least the 10th century. Monks in the Mito region of Japan are credited with its earliest recorded preparation, soybeans fermented with a bacterium called Bacillus subtilis natto. The result is a sticky, pungent food with a flavor profile most Westerners find challenging. In Ibaraki Prefecture, natto consumption per capita is among the highest in Japan, and Ibaraki consistently shows lower rates of cardiovascular mortality than national averages. That correlation sat unexamined for centuries. In 1987, a Japanese researcher named Hiroyuki Sumi changed that. Sumi was working at the Chicago Medical University when he made a specific observation. He was testing over 170 foods for fibrinolytic activity. Fibrinolytic means the ability to break down fibrin, the protein scaffold of blood clots. Most foods showed negligible activity. When Sumi added natto extract to a laboratory fibrin sample, something unexpected happened. The fibrin dissolved significantly faster than in any other sample he had tested. He named the active enzyme Nattokinase. Sumi published his findings, and the research community largely moved on. There was no patent to file, no molecule to own, no revenue model to build around it. The research continued anyway, slowly, in Japan, and later in Korea and the United States. Before we go further, I compiled the full research breakdown on nattokinase and heart prevention. The Forbidden Camping Vault includes the dosing data, the contraindication list, and the combination protocols that integrative cardiologists are beginning to study. The link is in the description. But stay here. The science section is where this gets real. The human body has its own fibrinolytic system. It produces an enzyme called plasmin that naturally breaks down fibrin as part of normal repair. The problem is that plasmin production declines significantly with age. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition in 2008 measured fibrinolytic activity in healthy adults across age groups and found a consistent decline beginning around age 40. By age 60, fibrinolytic capacity was roughly 40% lower than in younger adults. That means the body becomes progressively less efficient at clearing fibrin as we age. Fibrin accumulation in blood vessels is one of the contributing factors to cardiovascular risk. Nattokinase works through a different pathway than the body's natural plasmin system. It acts directly on fibrin and also stimulates the production of tissue plasminogen activator. Tissue plasminogen activator is the body's own fibrin clearing signal molecule. A study from JM Biomedical, published in Scientific Reports in 2019, measured fibrinolytic activity in healthy adults before and after 8 weeks of supplementation. Researchers found a significant increase in fibrinolytic markers in the treatment group. The placebo group showed no change. This was not a study on people with existing clots or diagnosed cardiovascular disease. These were healthy adults, prevention context. That distinction matters. A second study in hypertension research followed adults with mild hypertension for 8 weeks. The nattokinase group showed a systolic pressure drop of 5.5 millimeters of mercury. Many first-line blood pressure medications target a reduction of 5 to 10 millimeters. Stay with me, because the next section explains the specific reason this research has not translated into a standard recommendation at your annual physical. If you have made it this far, you understand more about fibrinolytic prevention than most people who will never hear this word from their doctor. Subscribe and share this with someone who is managing cardiovascular risk right now. The full research file is in the vault. Link in the description. Now stay with me. This is the part that explains the silence. So why is nattokinase not a standard recommendation in preventive cardiology? The answer is not that the research is weak. The answer is that the research is not funded at the scale required to move guidelines. Clinical guidelines in the United States require large randomized controlled trials. Those trials cost between $50 million and $200 million to run properly. That investment only makes financial sense if there is a patent on the other end. Nattokinase is a natural enzyme. It cannot be patented. No pharmaceutical company will spend $200 million to prove something they cannot own. So the trials stay small, the sample sizes stay limited, and the guidelines committees say the evidence is insufficient for a formal recommendation. The evidence is insufficient not because the science is absent. The evidence is insufficient because the funding mechanism that generates large trials is structurally allergic to molecules that cannot generate exclusive revenue. That is not a conspiracy. That is how the economics of clinical research actually work. The cardiovascular drug market generates over $60 billion per year in the United States. Anticoagulants alone account for over $15 billion of that annually. Statins account for another $12 billion. A $1 per day enzyme with 30 years of peer-reviewed research cites outside that system entirely because it was never designed to enter it. This is the part that should make you think carefully about how prevention advice reaches you. Now, here is what the current evidence actually supports and what it does not. Nattokinase has clinical evidence supporting its use for cardiovascular prevention in healthy adults who are not on anticoagulant medication. That is the accurate and honest framing of what the research shows. It is not a treatment for existing cardiovascular disease. It is not a replacement for prescribed anticoagulants under any circumstance. People on warfarin, Xarelto, Eliquis, or any blood thinner must not add nattokinase without explicit guidance from the physician managing their anticoagulation. The combination can affect bleeding risk in ways that require medical monitoring. That is a real interaction, and it is non-negotiable. For healthy adults over 40 with no current anticoagulant prescription, the evidence supports nattokinase as a reasonable addition to a cardiovascular prevention protocol. The study dose, in most trials, is between 1,000 and 2,000 fibrinolytic units per day. That translates to approximately 100 to 200 milligrams of standardized extract. Timing matters. Taking it on an empty stomach increases absorption significantly. Most researchers in this space recommend taking it either first thing in the morning, or at least 2 hours after a meal and 1 hour before the next. Turmeric with piperine is the second compound worth understanding in this context. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, has a different mechanism than nattokinase. It works primarily through anti-inflammatory pathways that affect platelet aggregation. Platelet aggregation is the first step in clot formation, where platelets clump together. Chronic low-grade inflammation accelerates platelet aggregation in blood vessels over time. A meta-analysis in Nutrition Journal in 2017 reviewed 12 clinical trials on curcumin supplementation and cardiovascular inflammatory markers. 11 of the 12 trials showed statistically significant reductions in CRP levels. CRP is C-reactive protein, one of the primary markers of systemic inflammation in the body. The problem with curcumin is absorption. On its own, bioavailability is extremely low. Piperine, found in black pepper, increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. That number appears in a study published in Planta Medica in 1998 and has been replicated in multiple subsequent trials. Without piperine, most curcumin supplements produce minimal measurable effect. With piperine, the anti-inflammatory activity becomes clinically meaningful. A 56-year-old woman from Oregon shared her experience in a preventive health forum. She had elevated CRP and mild hypertension at her annual physical 3 years in a row. Her physician offered a statin. She asked about lifestyle and supplement options instead. She implemented nattokinase and curcumin with piperine alongside dietary changes. At her next checkup, 12 months later, her CRP had dropped into normal range. Her blood pressure had improved enough that her physician agreed to continue monitoring rather than initiating medication. Her doctor told her whatever she was doing was working. She said it was the protocol. One case is not a clinical trial, but it reflects mechanisms the research supports directly. The science on nattokinase and curcumin is real, specific, and 30 years deep. It is not in your doctor's recommendation because it was never designed to get there, not because it failed, because it was never funded to succeed inside that system. Prevention is the window that closes slowly and quietly before anyone sounds the alarm. The research exists. The mechanisms are documented. The cost is $1 a day. This knowledge was not buried by a single decision. It was buried by 1,000 small decisions made inside a system that profits from treatment, not prevention. If this vault opens something for you today, subscribe and share it. Every share reaches someone still inside that window. The next vault opens soon, and what's inside is even heavier.